In the history of the world, there's rarely been anything positive about hearing the phrase "we need to talk," especially when it's paired with an elongated version of a spouse's name. When Greg suddenly became Gregory, I knew the final chapter was starting. The private investigator I'd hired, who looked like a 1950s gumshoe straight out of a black and white detective movie, was busy bugging the hotel room my wife Carol was sharing with her boss, John Hoffman, the newly appointed executive vice president of sales at Home First Enterprises, a friendly alternative to big box stores. The photos showed Mr. Hoffman getting more than a little friendly with my wife, in at least 4 compromising poses. From that moment, I devoted every spare second to planning my revenge. The key was to act normally until I was ready to unleash hell on the adulterers. The next week dragged on agonizingly slow. Carol was reluctant to talk about her workday, which had once been the centerpiece of our evening chats. She became increasingly withdrawn each day, but I persisted, asking, "Did anything interesting happen today? Who did you have lunch with? And my personal favorite, how's your new boss?" Carol would stammer out a vague response and quickly change the subject. Our evenings grew quieter. The private investigator had followed them enough to know that all their meetings took place during long Friday lunches. Hoffman would leave to call clients at 11:40, and Carol would follow 10 minutes later, using the excuse of a chiropractor appointment. They were meeting at a business-class motel on the highway. We had enough evidence to bury this couple in divorce court. The paperwork was ready, the metaphorical guns loaded, and the war horses eager to charge. It was time to catch them. I arrived at Home First Enterprises 5 minutes after Carol left. Walking in, I asked Maria, the receptionist, to let my wife know her husband was there to take her to lunch. "I'm sorry, Mr. Eaton, but your wife just left for a doctor's appointment," she replied. "A doctor?" I feigned confusion. "She has a standing appointment every Friday at 11:30. Some days she skips lunch entirely, but she always takes a long one on Fridays." "Thanks, I must have forgotten," I responded casually. The day before, I had purchased a prepaid phone to call her from an unfamiliar number. It was the last week of the quarter, and Carol couldn't afford to miss a call that might lead to a bonus-worthy sale. "Good afternoon, this is Carol Eaton," she answered sweetly, her voice as melodic as any good salesperson's should be. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her tone turning wary. "I was just trying to surprise you by taking you to lunch," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "But the receptionist mentioned you have a doctor's appointment every Friday. Are you okay?" I tried my best to appear concerned. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice tense. "Nothing special, just a routine adjustment at the chiropractor." "That's strange," I continued, pressing on. "I ran into Dr. Wizak a couple of hours ago, and he mentioned he hadn't seen you in over a year. He even joked, asking if you were cheating on him. When did you switch chiropractors?" Silence. "Could you at least tell me who our new bone crusher is?" I prodded further. "I don't have time for this nonsense right now," she snapped. "We'll talk tonight when I get home." And with that, she hung up. That evening, as usual, we ordered pizza. I was paying the delivery guy when Carol pulled into the garage in her black BMW. "About time," I muttered, hoping she didn't hear the edge in my voice. "I'm not feeling well, I'm going to lie down for a while," she mumbled, rushing upstairs. The next thing I heard was the bathroom door slamming shut. 3 hours later, when I finally joined her in bed, I nudged her gently. "Why are you being so secretive about the doctor? Is there something you're not telling me?" I asked, relentless. "Carol, I'm tired of worrying about you. Please, just tell me what's going on." "Stop bothering me," she snapped. "I told you everything is fine. It's been a long day, and I'm exhausted. We'll talk tomorrow." I struggled to fall asleep that night, listening to Carol cry into her pillow. I doubted she slept more than a few minutes at a time. I couldn't help but wonder how well Oedipus slept the night before he killed his father. On Saturday, Carol was a nightmare from the moment she woke up. If we'd had a dog, she'd have nipped at it. The promised conversation about the doctor never happened. Whenever I tried to bring it up, she dodged the subject. She managed to avoid me most of the day, but after lunch, I finally cornered her. Acting as if nothing had happened, I told her we had reservations at Antic, her favorite restaurant, for 6 o'clock that evening. Maybe it'll help lift your spirits, I added, trying to coax a smile from her. She just gave me a blank stare and shrugged. At 5, I found Carol sitting on our bed, staring at the wall. I got you a surprise, I said, holding out a box from Neiman Marcus. She didn't even open it. Feeling awkward, I stood there for a moment before saying, I hope you'll wear it tonight. When she came downstairs, I complimented her on how great she looked in her new dress. I was going to save this for a special occasion, but it looks like you need it now, I said, holding out another gift-wrapped box. Carol tore off the wrapping, opened the box, and began to sob. These will look great with your new dress and that string of pearls, I said softly. Dinner passed in near silence. Carol spoke so softly that even the waitress had trouble understanding her order. Even after 3 shots of vodka, she barely said a word. Most of the meal ended up in a doggy bag. When I pulled into the garage, Carol was out of the car before I even unbuckled my seatbelt. Thank you, she said, turning to face me. They were her first words in over 2 hours. I watched her walk upstairs and lock herself in the master bathroom. Standing on my tiptoes, I listened at the door. As I expected, she was on the phone with Hoffman, no doubt trying to reassure him that they would soon be together. I retreated to my den, waiting for my fate to unfold. I pulled a small vial from my suit pocket and downed a handful of tranquilizers. I'd been popping those little pills like candy ever since I found out about my wife's affair. It was the only thing keeping me sane. I watched Carol in the family room, mixing herself another drink. She was still wearing the little black dress I'd given her as a surprise earlier that evening. Catching my gaze, she looked away. Even though I knew the conversation that was coming, it still felt like a heart attack gripping my chest. I pretended to be engrossed in a book when she finally walked in. Carol stood in silence for a full 2 minutes before making small talk. Gregory, is that a good book? She asked. Hearing my full name and noticing she was staring at her feet rather than looking at me, I knew the end of our marriage was imminent. I'd rehearsed this moment for nearly 2 weeks, praying I wouldn't falter. I placed a bookmark between the pages, closed the book, and said, not as good as our marriage. So, what's on the mind of the woman I love more every day? Will you finally tell me what's troubling your soul? Tears welled up in her eyes. What's wrong, my love? I asked, feigning concern. I'm so worried about you. I took her hands in mine, and she was already sobbing. Did the doctor give you any bad news? No, she replied, her voice much louder than the room warranted. Is it your mom? Is she okay? I pressed. She shook her head. Your dad. My words were cut short as she shook her head again. I'm fine, I'm fine. No, it's something else. I stood up, pulled a chair out from under the octagon-shaped chess table, and motioned for my wife to sit down. As soon as she did, I said, I'll be right back. Where are you going? She asked, puzzled. I'll only be a couple of minutes. I need to get something from upstairs. I retrieved my attach case and laptop from the safe in my office. When I returned, Carol was sitting at her desk, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes red and puffy. Without a word, I set the bag on the floor next to the chair, then flicked the chess pieces off the board. They clattered onto the wooden floor as Carol watched with a confused expression. I sat down across from her, opened the laptop, and began typing. What are you doing? She asked. I put a finger to my lips and said, sure, almost done. The quiet clicking of the keys and her labored breathing were the only sounds in the room. After a couple of minutes, I closed the laptop and announced, all done. So, my loving wife, what is weighing so heavily on your mind? I'm having a very hard time getting started, she said, crying even harder. I handed her a handkerchief, and she finally managed to whisper, I don't want to hurt you. I know. This has been killing you, I said, trying to maintain eye contact, though she stared at the carpet. But I'll always love you. And whatever this is, we'll get through it together. That's what worries me the most, she said. I don't know if we can. What do you mean? I asked, my tone filled with genuine concern. Are you trying to tell me something, Carol? I don't know, she cried, her words barely audible. Taking her hands again, I asked, is there someone else? She didn't respond. Carol, I need you to be honest with me. Is there someone else? I repeated, my voice cracking. Yes, she finally admitted, tears streaming down her face. My heart sank. This was the moment I had dreaded, yet somehow, I felt a sense of relief knowing the truth was finally out. I nodded, trying to keep my composure. Is it serious? I asked, my voice trembling. I don't know, she replied, her voice shaky. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just did. I see, I said, swallowing hard. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with the tension between us. How long? I asked, barely able to get the words out. A few months, she confessed, her eyes avoiding mine. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice cracking with emotion. I was scared, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to hurt you. But you have, I said, my voice filled with pain. More than you can imagine. I'm so sorry, she cried, burying her face in her hands. I sat in silence, the reality of the situation sinking in. The woman I loved, the woman I had shared my life with, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How could she do this to me? To us? Finally, I spoke, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you want to do, Carol? Do you want to try to work things out, or are you done with us? I don't know, she said, her voice filled with uncertainty. I don't know what I want. Her words cut through me like a knife. I had hoped she would choose us, choose our life together, but her indecision only deepened the wound. I stood up, my legs feeling weak beneath me. I need some time to think, I said, my voice shaking. I need to figure out what I want. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving Carol sitting alone at the chess table, her sobs echoing in the empty space. I didn't know what the future held for us, but one thing was clear, our lives would never be the same again.